You're listening to the When Life Hands You Lennon's podcast.
But in an entry-level film production, it's one strike and you're out. You're fired. I'm not calling you back.
If your goal today is to make a basket, we're going to make that basket.
The minute you create something, as soon as it's made tangible, you have a copyright in it.
How do I get our guys to sound that big, that full when they do the harmonies?
And I'm your host, Lennon Seahawk. Let's get to the show. Hello and welcome to this week's episode of When Life Hands You Lennon's. This week's episode features Lawrence Lui. Now, he is a co-founder in the music marketing agency called Bampire, and he is an EDM music executive. He has worked with deadmau5's, Swedish House Mafia, Claptone, Tritonal, Above and Beyond, No Copyright Sounds, and now he's got his company called Bampire. So in this episode, we talk about all things marketing. We talk about the importance of having a narrative and how him and his agency kind of pull that narrative out and why it's important to have this narrative and how you can portray that narrative into your marketing strategy. We also talk about the not getting so attached to your music. And some artists get so attached to their music and they have a very difficult time kind of letting it go and going out into the world and releasing it and kind of letting it do its thing because they're so emotionally attached to it. But Lawrence thinks that you should not kind of distance yourself from it because when you're very attached to it, it makes it difficult to let it go. We also talk about if you should have an agency or a PR company handle your marketing. I mean, Lawrence is a little bit biased, but I was curious to get his perspective because he's worked with so many different artists from, independent artists to major label artists and major labels. So I was curious to get his perspective and what he thought on the importance of marketing and what he thinks on PR agencies and a marketing agency. So this is a really interesting conversation. Lawrence gives so much information and a lot of really good techniques and things to think about. So get your notepad out, be ready to take lots of notes and start brainstorming for yourself. And before we jump into the episode, I want to remind you to please sign up to my mailing list. It helps me notify you when new episodes like this are live. I'd also appreciate a 5-star rating and review on Apple Podcasts or wherever you listen to podcasts because it helps boost the show and help it be discovered by new listeners. You can follow me on Instagram, which is just Lennon Seahawk. I post my musings there. I share some of my daily life and podcast snippets and exciting things coming up in the music world. You can follow me on my website as well, lennonseahawk.com. I post all my podcasts there as well, and you can read some of my blog posts. If you or somebody you know would be a good guest for the show, there's a guest request form in the show notes below. Please fill that out. So without further ado, let's dive into this incredibly insightful conversation with Lawrence Lui. Thanks for being on the show. I'm excited to connect and chat with you. You have a lot of experience, so I'm excited to kind of dive into what you're up to and what you've been up to and how you got to where you are. And you thankfully you sent over some topics as well that we can cover, and I think those are some important ones, and I wrote some of them down so we can cover those throughout the episode as well. But first of all, we have to address your album collection in the background. I see some, does it look like 33s there? LPs?
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, I used to be a DJ. I used to be a college. I got my start in the music business as a college radio DJ.
Okay.
Back in the day at WBKR up in Poughkeepsie, Vassar College, and then I was the music director at WNYU. Which is NYU's college radio station. Been playing music, DJing music my whole life, love vinyl, and sort of that's my collection back there,
It's great.
Yeah.
Cool. Who are some of the artists that you've got in there?
You know what? It's a lot of different stuff. I used to DJ, when I was at NYU, I was a music director, and I DJ'd the New Afternoon Show, which was mostly kind of indie rock experimental. But I also DJ'd this show called Digilution, which was kind of out there experimental, kind of IDM and kind of electronic music. So at the time it was things like Luke Vibert and Aphex Twin, the things on Warp Records, and so I have a lot of that vinyl. And I have a lot of like interesting kind of rare classic rock and things like that. Like there's a Rolling Stones album called, I think, Her Majesty's like Satanic something, and it has one of the first kind of 3D lenticular covers and stuff. And so I have that original vinyl. So
cool. Yeah, my dad collects vinyl and has for probably 40 years, and he's got a massive collection. So I grew up with a whole bunch of different kinds of music, so I'm always interested. He was actually on the show like a few years ago when we talked about collecting vinyl and how to take care of your collection. And so I'm always interested to see what people are listening to, because I think that gives us a good taste of who they are. And being a DJ, you've got to have a little bit of everything. So take us back to that point, and then after school, what did you get into? How you kind of got into the music industry?
Yeah, well, like you say, I've been doing this for a while. So I was the music director at WNYU, like I said. And from there, I went to do radio promotions. So I did radio promotions for V2 Records, which was Richard Branson of Virgin Records. Yep. He sold Virgin to EMI. Yep. And then he started a new label called V2, which actually had a lot of really cool records. They released the Underworld record, a band called Mercury Rev, which is still one of my favorite records. Granddaddy, which is really, really big in the indie rock scene. Also Moby's Play, which is that platinum record up there. I think it went triple platinum. Was Moby's biggest record by far. Every song on it was synced. So that went number one at college radio and had a bunch of radio hits. And I was working the radio at that time. And then I went over to Astroworks to be a senior director of marketing there. So they were a part of Virgin, a part of EMI, and then a part of Capitol. So they kind of moved around. And there I worked on Chemical Brothers, Basement Jaxx, Swedish House Mafia, and deadmau5, Porter Robinson's first album, all the way to like Eric Prydz, Pet Shop Boys, all kinds of great records. And then I went over to Island for a bit, where I worked on Sam Felt, Yellow Claw, Kaisa, these great Norwegian producers called Seeb, who produced.
Love Seeb.
Yeah. So I think they were just, they produced. I took a pill in Ibiza, that song. So the Mike Posner song that got huge. It was like the second most streamed song that year behind Drake. So worked on that, and now I have my own marketing agency for music that I've had for a few years now, with my partner Justin Kleinfeld, who specializes in publicity and PR. He used to be Tiesto's publicist, and we work closely together. I basically, do the marketing. He does the PR. We worked on Prodigy's last album, Claptone's last album. We worked on Amon Tobin's last album. We worked on marketing the Winter Music Conference a few years ago, the last time that it was live in Miami. It just happened, actually. Online. I was just in some of the rooms there. And then we also work. We have a long-standing relationship with Above and Beyond, and their label, and Anjuna Beats, and Anjuna Deep, and all the Matt Zoe and all the artists on that label as well. And so I've been really fortunate in being in this wild and crazy ride of like electronic dance music, and just ending up working on some of the biggest artists in the genre, and just doing all these kind of arena level shows and everything. And it's been it's been a wild ride, but a lot done as well. So
yeah. I mean, congrats on all of that success. I mean, you're probably one of the guys behind a lot of the music that I've discovered and listened to. And one of the reasons how I discovered them. I got into music journalism a few years ago, and I've worked with Reflector for a number of years on a number of different campaigns.
Sure.
Great team there. And Justin, I believe he's hit my inbox a few times as well. But it's so crazy to see all the artists that you've worked on and how you manage all of that. So I want to get into that. What does it take to get an artist that's kind of at the beginning of their career, like Sieb or like deadmau5? I mean, deadmau5 has been massive for better part of 10, 15 years now.
Right.
But what does it take for an artist that's going to the level of an Eric Prydz or a deadmau5 or, Sieb at this point? What does it take for them to... My cat's in the way. What does it take? What does it take to get an artist to that level? Or like, what are the strategies behind a marketing campaign like that?
I think there's a lot of different things. There is, it's everything that we as marketing people do. The way that I look at Bampire, my company, is that we look at everything holistically. So it's not just one thing that is going to break an artist. It's not just the publicity. It's not just radio. It's not just playlisting. It's not just touring, but it's making sure all of these things are popping as much as they can. So I think that's key. Just having a really, really good, tight plan, and executing it. And then there is a bit of kind of lightning in a bottle kind of things. When Swedish House Mafia first started, their manager, Amy Thompson, is brilliant. She was great, but they were there at the right moment, with some really amazing next level marketing, that Amy kind of put together and we helped execute. And they were there at the right time in the right place, to become like the first, DJ group to play those massive arena level shows, sold out Madison Square Garden, and all of that, So there is a bit of lightning in a bottle. You can sort of tell when an artist like Eric Prydz is ready to be, ready to go to the next level and be huge. There's just, it's the type of music that he does. Same thing with Porter Robinson. People just started gravitating towards that type of music. Same thing with the Chemical Brothers.
Mm-hmm.
I think it all starts with the music. If people really vibe with the music, it really resonates with kind of the zeitgeist of the moment, and a lot of people, and it's what they want to hear, and it's what they want to party to, it's what they want to make their memories with, and then it becomes a thing, and it sort of takes on a life of its own. And then you're sort of doing as much as you can, to kind of keep that ball rolling. For the Swedish House Mafia, it was like they were doing these massive shows. And then, it was all a matter of, working with the radio department very closely at Capitol to create a huge pop hit, which we did. So, so that was a very exciting time, a very exciting ride, but it's cyclical, because, there was this first wave of electronica, with the Chemical Brothers and Fatboy Slim and Daft Punk, and I was there for all of that as well, and that was very exciting. And then that sort of died down a little, and then it sort of came back with in a big way with all these festivals and Vegas residencies, and artists like Swedish House Mafia and deadmau5's and Coachella and all. So it sort of kind of came back in a big way, and now so that's so that's what we're doing.
What are the commonalities between these artists that you've worked with?
The commonality
Like in their marketing, like what are some things that you see that are congruent and that are kind of the same or similar? And then what are the things that really, is there a particular artist that you worked with that you can kind of get into these cyclical things? Or is it every artist has a very, very unique angle that they're taking?
I think what you just said, I think every artist has a very unique fingerprint, and a unique way to market them. And they have unique challenges as well, Eric Prydz, for a while, he was, he didn't really like flying, so touring was more difficult for him. So we had to go around that. Some artists love doing interviews. Other artists, that's not a part of what they do. Some artists are great on socials, and some artists, need more help with from the label or the marketing team with that. So I think, and more importantly, every artist has their own narrative. Every artist has their own image that they're trying to portray. The type of music that Claptone does, is totally, totally different than the audience is totally different than the type of music the Prodigy does,
Yes.
and and there's a totally different audience. So you really are just, every marketing plan is completely bespoke and different. That's what keeps things interesting. There's no kind of cookie cutter that works for, Eric Prydz or Porter Robinson or deadmau5. They all have their unique strengths and challenges and their unique audience. So, with Above and Beyond, it's interesting because they have, such a devoted fan base,
Yes.
that definitely intersects with your mainline EDM fan base, but it
Sure.
kind of goes beyond that. There are just fans of, they've been doing this for about 20 years, and there are fans of just Above and Beyond and just the Anjunabeats sound,
Mhm.
and so they have grown this huge audience, by just kind of maintaining the quality of their music, and maintaining a very good connection with their fans, and so they're able to do like really, really big shows like Hollywood Bowl and Madison Square Garden. They're even able to do unique different things, like doing they did a tour of an acoustic tour, and things like that. So, and was totally packed, totally sold out as well. So they're, like I said, completely different and unique from what Claptone does, from what Swedish House Mafia was, so it's very unique. And that's what, like I said, that's what keeps things interesting.
So you're talking about a narrative. How do you formulate that narrative as an artist? How would you work with an artist that maybe doesn't have a narrative, or maybe does, but it's not unique enough to really capture the attention of anybody? Do you find that often?
Yeah, you know what? I this is a really interesting question, because that's something that we work with every day. Because I feel like, especially working primarily in electronic dance music, and we do work with other artists as well, pop artists, things like that. I think it's a challenge that sort of especially is for in the DJ world, to an extent, because a lot of DJs, they prefer to just sort of almost be behind the scenes. They're just working on their music, and if they put out great music, they feel like that should be enough, and our job is to sort of tease out a story that behind that. I almost feel like, pop music, singer-songwriter music, it's almost a little bit easier to build a narrative for those type of genres, insofar as like at the very least you have the lyrics, right? You have like, what is, Taylor Swift, like what is the meaning behind the lyrics of these songs? They're very heartfelt. With dance music, a lot of it's instrumental. And the lyrics are sometimes kind of incidental, right? And so it really is, you really have to kind of get in the trenches with the artist and really kind of tease out and talk to them. We do these very kind of in-depth calls with all the artists that we work with to sort of tease out the narrative and the concept behind their music. So it is a little bit more challenging with DJs, producers, electronic dance music in general, because a lot of these artists, understandably, just sort of want their music to stand up for itself, and doesn't want the story to be about them, as opposed to just having the music. So yeah, it's an interesting question, but one that we deal with every day.
And it's an important one. I always talk about the importance of having a narrative and having a story, because as a music journalist, if you just send me the link to your SoundCloud or a Spotify, I don't have anything to talk about. Like, what do you want me to say about this? I don't know who you are, where you come from, what this song is about. I don't know anything. Right. So having that narrative gives me something to talk about, gives me some food to chew on, and really kind of relate and tie things together with your songs and with other artists, and, do those comparisons or not. So what are some of the three things that need to be part of a narrative? If somebody doesn't have one and like, I don't know what to talk about, what are some 3 points that you should consider?
Well, I'll give you some examples of how we sort of teased out narratives for artists, for newer artists, where at first it wouldn't have been so apparent, at first glance. So we work with this great Anjuna deep house artist, English guy called Marsh, and so he was putting out this beautiful instrumental, mostly instrumental, it's got vocals, kind of deep house album on Anjuna Deep. It's great music, and we wanted to try to get as much notice for it as possible. And so we spoke to him, and we realized there were some interesting things about his life. He is a transplant. He's English, but he lives in Cincinnati. And with he met his American wife, and he lives with his wife in Cincinnati. So basically, sort of in the middle of nowhere in the Midwest, and then his wife, was also a nurse, so she was kind of like a frontline worker in this whole pandemic. And so we basically sort of spun a story about that. That was the kind of a fish out of water kind of English, a deep house DJ, that is sort of stranded in a way in the Midwest in Cincinnati. And we actually got a lot of great traction from that, especially with local press. He was on local TV in Cincinnati. He did a big radio interview for a big Chicago station, among a bunch of other things as well, because that whole fish out of water kind of narrative kind of worked for him. Like I said, it's different for every artist. There's another kind of newer artist that we were working with called Keith Harris, and he's more in the pop vein because he's been working behind the scenes for many years as the musical director and drummer for Black Eyed Peas.
Oh wow.
Yeah. So, and he has, he's a brilliant musician, a brilliant writer, producer. He has his multiple Grammys, and his writing credits on like billion streaming, songs, but he was very much kind of behind the scenes, you know? So, and he wanted to become an artist, you know, and put out his album. He had all these songs, you know? And so, but he was sort of an unknown entity. And so the way we sort of, you know, helped launch him is one of the first things we did was, you know, because we knew what his skill set was, right? He had a home studio. He knew pretty much everybody who's anybody in the sort of pop world, you know? And so he had this huge Rolodex, you know? And you know, and then we sort of saw that it kind of worked with the campaign that Prince was having a birthday. Like Prince's birthday was coming up like in like a few weeks, right? And so we were like, hey, why don't you do a cover of a Prince song for Prince's birthday and get some of your kind of celebrity friends, you know, like to come in and work on it with you. We'll make a little video out of it. It can be very lo-fi, you know, and then we'll push it out to all the press. So that's what he did, you know, because we knew that was in his skill set. He could just easily just do a cover, call a couple of his friends and do a cover. So he had Jordan Sparks, who won, you know, the American Idol a few years ago. He had her singing on it, and Craig Robinson, who's most known as an actor in The Office. He's the warehouse guy in The Office.
Yes.
Okay.
Yes. I was like, where have I heard that?
And Craig he's also a musician. He's a keyboardist and a singer.
Yeah, he's great.
And so he brought this little band together to make this great version of Purple Rain, you know. And then it was very timely, you know, because it was like Prince's birthday, and so people wanted to cover it, and we got a lot of traction from that, and that really helped us kind of put him on the map, you know, so that we can kind of springboard the release of his album. So, no, those two completely different examples, you know, of you know, very kind of, you know, developing artists. They're not arena level at all, you know, that we try to weave a story around, you know, and that's something that I think, and I'm very proud that, you know, between myself and Justin, we're quite good at kind of crafting that story.
You have to be
the artist, you know.
You have to be, and be able to pull out, like, for example, like Marsh, like you said, like he's English and married to this American woman, lives in the middle of Cincinnati, in the middle of the Midwest, and like is stranded. Like being able to pull those details and then formulate a whole story and campaign around that is impressive. It takes a lot of talent to be able to do that and recognize what's standout and what's not. So
yeah, exactly. And it's all an effort to get the music heard, you know, because the music is great. And then that will help, that story will help springboard people into being curious and listening to the music.
So when a campaign picks up, like the one that they did, what was his name? The Black Eyed Peas one?
Keith Harris.
Keith Harris. I was thinking Craig Robinson, but that's the actor.
Yeah,
Keith Harris. And then Marsh, like once you get those campaigns to kind of take off and you're starting to get traction, what are the next steps? Are you capturing, like, are you giving fans a reason, like, to follow them on social medias? Are you getting them to an email list? Are you getting them to subscribe on Twitch? Like, what's the next step?
Well, a lot of it has to do with feeding the beast as far as content and assets, you know? So we basically have this list of things that would be good content, whether it be clips of like behind the scenes clips or like kind of clips on like the making of a song, you know, to remixes, to acoustic versions, you know. So a lot of it is just kind of feeding the beast of continually sort of putting together ideas for more content. You know, and so I think that helps. That's why, you know, that's the whole Spotify algorithm is helped if you just continue to release singles and more songs and things like that. You know, we are also really big, you know, on collaborations. Keith Harris, you know, collaborated with a number of great artists, including Jordan Sparks on his tracks, and that sort of helps. That helps kind of borrow the audience from these other bigger artists, you know, so that's also something that really helps as well. But, you know, there's a lot of things, you know, that, you know, after the release of an album or a song that can be done to kind of continue to feed the fire of exposure. It can, you know, it used to be touring, before the pandemic. And I think that's all going to come back. I'm looking at routings right now for a lot of artists, and artists are really, I think going to be quite as aggressive as they can be, while still being safe, to start having shows like as soon as they can. So I think that's really opening up, especially in the fall. I think that things are going to really sort of start popping in that world. But touring is a big part of kind of keeping a campaign going for an album as well, or a career.
I'm excited to see how touring and the live industry comes back, because I think it's going to have this like explosive growth, and it's going to be an absolute massive return. Like I think tickets are going to be sold out to virtually every show on the planet. And it's going to be a rarity to be able to get into a concert. I'm hoping, because it's good for the artists, it's good for people to get back, it's good for the businesses, it's good for the venues, it's good for everything to kind of keep the get the economy going again. So going back just a little bit, the word for artists, and for me personally as a musician who's sitting on a few tracks that I want to release in the coming hopefully 6 months, the word content scares me. And I think it scares a lot of artists, because they don't want to live on social media. I don't want to live on social media. But having this, somebody continually breathing down your neck to push content, whether it be an Instagram post, a tweet, a behind the scenes, like that's a lot of work to keep that content up. But it's one of the main ways to connect with fans, and like creating TikToks and like posting one a day. It's like, that's what everybody recommends, is you got to post one a day. So how do you work around or work with that limitation that some artists or musicians may have when content is like, I don't want to do that, I just want to do music?
Yeah, I think that's a really good question. I feel like it has to start with the artist and whatever they feel comfortable doing. So, one of the first things I say when I start working with an artist is, here's the deal. I'm a marketing guy. I have a lot of experience doing all kinds of marketing campaigns. I will give you suggestions of things to do. If you're not comfortable with it, or if it's off brand in any way, and it's just something you don't feel like you want to do, that's fine. Then we move on, and then we'll do something else. We'll work around that. But I will not I will definitely give my suggestions, based on my experience. I'm going to say, so some of these things may seem, I don't know, cheesy to you, or too promotory or whatever,
Promotional.
They're not to me. Some people don't like to do, drops for radio stations, like, hi, you're listening to X radio station, I'm this artist, So, some artists, the radio is a whole other can of worms. Some artists don't like to play radio shows or things like that, especially with DJs where, they want, the radio station wants them to play the one song, and, it's not like they're a band, so they're just going to press play on a song, so that, that's also kind of a bit of a challenge there, once they get to that level where radio stations want them to come play their jingle balls and their radio station shows. So, I think it's, if an artist vibes with a certain platform, whether it's Instagram or TikTok or some of the artists are getting into Clubhouse these days, then, let them do that, and then, not to overwhelm them with just demands for a lot of content. And also to give them a sense that this content can be really simple and lo-fi. I think a lot of artists have a tendency to kind of overthink it, and everything needs to be kind of beautifully shot and the perfect angle and things like that. But I think what people like, what fans like to see is something that's real and gritty, and not necessarily like too processed, But it's true. Some artists don't like to show that aspect of their lives and want to sort of keep that part private, and they're not like on TikTok and things like that. But it's something that we kind of work around. And yeah.
Yeah, I noticed, funny that you mentioned Clubhouse, because deadmau5 really got into Clubhouse. And
I think he's off of it now, though.
I think he's off now. But about a month or two ago, when the hype was really kind of, I guess, peaking, he was on there almost daily. I mean, I could go on there 2-3 times a day, and he was on there talking about something. Yeah. And my God, they were hilarious. I mean, he's a hilarious dude. Yeah. He's just, I mean, he says what he says. He doesn't have a filter, and that's what makes him deadmau5. Yeah. And he was talking about like running a chicken farm. And I'm like, where did this even start? Like, how did this happen? Right. But it's very interesting. And then he had these cool sessions where you'd have 1 minute to ask him a question, anything you wanted. Yeah. And he would give his response, so he would bring people up. And it was like very interesting, but it was on brand with him because he was able to just log on and just shit post in Clubhouse and just talk about whatever the hell he wanted. And he's such a random, intelligent dude. I think he's very intelligent. And just talk about whatever he wanted. And I think that was super on brand for him. And he was talking about an OnlyFans for his cat. And then people were, it's like just really weird off deadmau5y stuff. Yeah.
I think he's really good at connecting with his fans. I think, before Clubhouse, there was, he was always, he was always live streaming, just him listening to demos or, just, he's great because he's just interested in what he's interested in, and you can be interested in it or not. He doesn't really care, so he's really he's a total gearhead, right? Yes. So, he can talk for hours about the intricacies of, of analog, a certain piece of analog gear that he has, he doesn't care if you're into it or not, but somehow he's built this huge audience of people that will just listen to him talk and on various platforms. But he definitely kind of puts himself out there. So, he's kind of a celebrity because he definitely puts himself out there and live streams and is on Clubhouse and kind of connects with his fans and is very kind of off the cuff and kind of honest about what he thinks, and I think that's part of his appeal and why people kind of connect with him, so I think he's really on point there. So it's interesting you're talking about Clubhouse and things like Twitch and I'm going to connect it with what you're talking about, like when, I'm very curious when things open up, and people start going out in real life more, and you're saying that a lot of these festivals, a lot of these shows, everything's going to be packed and sold out, and I agree with you. I'm wondering if these other platforms where people are, just like watching DJ sets on Twitch, or listening in on Clubhouse, whether these ones are going to go down, because these platforms are going to sort of lose a bit of traction because people want to do things more in real life. I think it's an interesting question, because I think they will a little bit. I think people say, oh yeah, well, people will still always want to be on Twitch because you can't always go to a show, but it's a different experience, and I don't know. I think that's an interesting question.
I'm wondering. So there's an artist named Clary, and she's a singer-songwriter and got her start on Periscope and built it up to like 130,000 followers. But she got started on it like in 2015, and she was just playing on the Santa Monica Pier. And then somebody came up and started telling her like, hey, they're really loving you on Periscope. So she started live streaming on Periscope while she was performing on the pier. So there were people in person watching her, giving her tips, throwing money in her guitar case, and she was taking requests for them. But then she was also interacting with people on Periscope. So theoretically,
like
she was
a hybrid.
Yes. So I'm wondering if that's going to be somehow incorporated for artists that maybe go on a, 14-date tour or 30-date tour, where if somebody is not going to Seattle, Washington, but there's a lot of fans there, they can live stream their sets in, say, Austin or Miami or wherever they're going, and then the fans from Seattle and Chicago and Minneapolis or wherever they're at can tune in live, and somehow that experience will be elevated and taken to the next level somehow. I don't know how, but I'm curious to see how that will work. Because I think it's really, the pandemic has opened up inclusivity and allowed people to just pop in and pop out whenever they want. Sure. And I'm curious to see how that'll work, if artists will even continue doing it. I'm wondering if the internet will just die for 6 months to a year.
Right. I mean, I think there's a hunger to be out there in real life and to be kind of mingling with real, people, and not to be kind of stuck in rooms like we are now, you know. So just for just for a change, even, So just to be able to go down to the pub, something simple, and just hang out with friends, it's something kind of novel now. So I think people will want to do that more. So,
So I have another podcast here in like 15 or 20 minutes. So I want to wrap it up with a couple, they may be bigger questions to you and may take a whole nother separate episode, but I want to touch on them briefly. So
sure.
So when I picture marketing, you think of like, a lot of artists think, okay, I need to send an email out to X amount of bloggers or playlist curators. And they don't really understand the in-depth details of what marketing or a marketing plan really is. So can you talk about why it's important and what it kind of, on top of the things we've already discussed, like what are some other things that need to be considered? And then, you mentioned patience as well. Why patience is important during this time of promotion, or even just continually releasing your music. Like, you're not going to catch on fire like the day after. Sometimes it takes 2, 3, 4 years to even get a little bit of traction.
Yeah. I mean, just kind of going back to what we were saying before, I have found that artists in general these days, are open to marketing, are open to marketing themselves. I think we've reached the point where there's an understanding now that in order for you to do the best for your career, you need to focus on it, and you can't just, here's a bunch of music, love it or hate it. I'm a genius. I'm not going to do any promotional marketing. I think it's understood now, like all modern artists pretty much, that know that they need to do some of that, and they need to know a little bit about some of that, whether it's social media or media training for interviews or things like that, or doing live streams or having a great live show. They know that a lot of their work, once the music is finished, a lot of their work still needs to be done. So I think there is an understanding. I think artists are kind of different than they were before, in understanding that they do need to sort of reach out to their fans. It's sort of expected these days for them to be more of a presence online and to create these assets, this content, as I'm calling it. So what I'm saying is that for the most part, they work. We work very closely, and as long as it's on brand for them, they're happy to do it, and they realize that this is a grind and it's work, but they're gonna do it. As far as patience, I think the thing with artists is that, when they make a song and they release it out into the world, they obviously, want this to be, the song that reaches as many people as possible, So what they're not seeing is that you have to look in terms of their career and not just one song, right? Because I sort of get it. When you're an artist, you put out a song, you want as many people to hear it as possible. It's kind of your baby, and you want your baby to be loved, So, and if it's not, you feel kind of dejected or angry or whatever, right? Angry at the label or whatever, right? For not promoting you enough. And so, but I think people need to realize that it's a marathon, not a not a sprint, and that especially in this day and age, where it's all about releasing singles on a consistent level, that that if this one doesn't hit, this one doesn't resonate, then maybe the next one will, and they just kind of keep building from song to song, from track to track, from record to record. And so I think people need to kind of keep that in view when they're releasing their music, and almost not be too precious, about releasing this work of genius, that they work so hard on. Sometimes they work for years, and into the world, for it to hopefully resonate. But if it doesn't, then just go on to the next, So I think artists need kind of patience and to grow a bit of sort of thicker skins, and to realize that, it's a build and sometimes it takes time. So especially if you're a new artist or a developing artist.
Sure.
And not to get frustrated.
That's a good point. I think a lot of artists get so attached and they think like, this is my baby. I've worked for 6 months, day in and day out on this album or this 7-track LP or EP. And I want to release it. And I say, it has to be in the Billboard Top 100. It has to be a smash hit or I'm going to be upset. But in reality, that's most likely not going to happen. The chances of that happening are very, very low. It's possible. Nothing's impossible. But I think a lot of artists keep their music so close to their heart that it makes it difficult to market it because they're so attached to it that when it doesn't catch, it's like a big letdown and discouraging. But like you said, when you keep it too close to you, you've got to let it go, and you got to let other people love it. But it's
almost need to see it like treat it like a job or something, or like or have some kind of distance between yourself and your work, and say and just create your work and then just put it out. And at one point, you have to put it out. And I'm very much into the artist Steve Keen, who just did all these paintings, and then he would sell them for like $10 each, but he would have so many, and just not to overthink it, and to put it out. I almost feel like one of the things, I don't remember the term right now, but it's sort of like the lowest common denominator product or something like that. Like it's for like people who make apps or something like that. It's not like you should put out inferior music or something like that, but get your music to the point where it's good and you like it, and just put it out. Don't overthink it. Don't wait for the perfect moment, or wait for the perfect marketing plan, or wait for your perfect team to be around you. At one point, you just have to put it out into the world.
One of the people that comes to mind that's inspiring in this aspect is the graphic artist Beeple, and I know you've heard of him.
Yeah.
Where he releases they were called daily drawings or dailies or something. And he put out a graphic design or a piece of art. Sometimes it was relating with pop culture. Sometimes it was political. Sometimes it was music culture. But it was an everyday thing. And he just did it for, I don't know how many years.
Right.
And now look at him. He's a renowned graphic designer. And he put it out for free. And you could use his designs and stuff for free. I remember using some of his stuff and piddling around with it and stuff years ago. But that type of thing where you can just push out that much content and just practice and get feedback from fans, from artists, from other professionals in that field is inspiring. And I think a lot of artists and creatives can learn from what people did, just by not getting so attached to it and just releasing it. Just put it out. Don't think so much about it.
Exactly.
That's a good point.
And you get practice. You're making a lot of you're making a lot of art. So.
And it kind of rewires your brain to think differently about it too, if you just keep going. So the last question here is, what are the benefits of having, say, a marketing agency versus somebody who's like, oh, I can just do it myself. I want to do the marketing myself, versus, oh, I want to hire somebody to do the marketing and help me build this plan out.
I mean, maybe I'm biased, but I don't think you can do it yourself.
Okay.
I think there is the reasons that labels exist, the reasons that agencies like myself exist, is that, artists need a team. They can't be an expert at everything. I think there are, people can always point at examples like, oh, this artist did it themselves and now they're huge, but, for the most part, a lot of the artists, independent artists, are trying to do it themselves or don't take the whole marketing aspect seriously, or feel like they can just do this one thing that they're good at. They don't get that far. They still need a team. Of course, like I said, of course, there are examples of people who just put stuff on TikTok and become huge. And it's kind of almost a new economy in that way. But always at one point, like a Lil Nas X has a team behind him now. Always at one point, there needs to be experts, that kind of can take over. And, and these experts have relationships, that have been built out over years. I can call certain people I know from years ago that, that work at radio stations, that, and, an artist can only do so much in that world. So I feel like it's definitely necessary. I mean, especially it's interesting because during the pandemic, we actually, were very, very busy, so we did really well over the last year. Because without the crutch of touring, and playing to like huge festivals and things like that, where they can automatically get a bunch of fans just by doing that, the need for creative marketing is even more these days. Because they don't have the touring to kind of bolster growing their fan base. Now they're completely dependent on just kind of putting out their songs, right? And then having the marketing around that. So I feel like it's even more important these days to have a team that sort of knows what they're doing.
Interesting.
Knows what buttons to push.
Sure.
Yeah.
And I think it's good to have that third party perspective as well. Like if you're
Yes.
so attached to your music, it's like you have a specific way that you want the story to be told. But when you're talking to somebody like you're like, actually, that doesn't make sense. I think this makes more sense. And it's like, oh, I didn't think of that. I didn't think of that way. So
I mean, it's possible that, you're lightning in a bottle and you're both a musical genius and a marketing genius, but the likelihood of that happening is not so likely,
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
So.
Yeah. And marketing is a whole, like you said, it's a whole beast in and of itself. It's a whole separate thing. And it's a big thing to talk about. So
it keeps us very busy. It keeps us, moving all the time.
Yes.
And it's always changing, So I just did a great a clubhouse room for an artist we're working with called Tritonal. And they just put out a completely different type of record. It's a kind of a chill meditation ambient record, which is totally different from what they've done before. And so we're marketing in a totally different way, getting reviews in Yoga Journal, getting it played in like, totally different types of shows. And so they were just up at doing a room in Clubhouse with BT. BT has he's also he's kind of a Clubhouse native, and he does a regular room there on Thursdays. And we had Chad Tritonal come in and kind of talk about the record on Clubhouse. So, there's all these different, shifting sands, as far as, platforms to market too, and things are always changing. So there's a lot of things to keep track of.
Yeah, it's a world that everything changes every day. Clubhouse's platforms pop up on a daily basis. Twitter launches their
Two
competitor.
years ago, or a year and a half ago, nobody was talking about Twitch. Right now, everybody knows that word.
Yeah, it's
You
it's
know,
becoming the new Facebook. Facebook's kind of dying off, thank God, and Twitch and other platforms are coming up.
there's
So
Discord as well.
yes,
Where people build their fan base on that. So there's a
yeah.
lot. There's a lot of things that need to be taken care of.
Yeah, I'm actually the next podcast that I'm doing is actually he's an artist that's released numerous times on No Copyright Sounds, and
Yeah,
we
we work with
were
them.
oh
Mhm.
yeah, great.
Yeah.
His name is Exod, and I don't know if you've heard of him or not, but he's kind of up and coming. And we went to Full Sail together. We
Oh
had a few
wow.
classes together, and now he's doing amazing things. And he has a Discord community, so I'm excited to talk to him about how he's building his community in Discord because it's such a different way than just creating a Facebook group.
Yeah.
And it's like it's very interesting. So I'm curious to
Well,
learn how he's doing it.
what's great about all these platforms is that there's so many different ways now to build an audience, to build a fan base, to build a community, that
Mhm.
artists can. But you're right, it can be kind of overwhelming. Someone who's really into Clubhouse may not be into Discord, and so you can sort of have to, or someone who's really into Instagram Reels, may
Yep.
not be into TikTok, and so
Mhm.
you have to kind of bridge everything as a marketing person and kind of keep everything in balance.
Mhm. Yeah. That's great. So, how can the listeners keep up with you and follow your company and, get information that you're sharing?
Sure. Well, they can go to my socials or, my name, basically, Lawrence Lui. Um, and yeah, it's just I have a website, lawrencelouis.com. The marketing agency is called Bampire with a B. So it's bampiremusic.com. All the socials are very simple. It's my name, Lawrence Lui. So you can reach out to any of those, and yeah, we can talk.
Great. Great. And I'll link all of those in the show notes as well so everybody can check you out and follow you. But this has
Cool.
been a wonderful conversation. I'm so glad that we connected and got to have this conversation because it was shared so much information. And yeah, congrats on everything that you've accomplished and continue to accomplish. And I look forward to hopefully getting some of your pitches and working with you in the future.
Absolutely. Yeah,
Cool.
definitely. Had a great
Thank you,
time. Thanks
Lawrence.
a lot, Lennon.
Take care.
You too.